Hi friends, welcome back to Excel Map. This is Srinivas Reddy. In this video session, we'll discuss an important concept called pivot table. So, what is pivot table? What is the exact definition of pivot table? Pivot table is summarize and analyze complex data into a pivot table. That means we'll arrange the data and we'll summarize the data into a pivot table without writing any formulas. Now we'll see what is pivot table with an example. Here we can see some data like dates, product, regions, sales represents, customers and units sales. Actually, the pivot table option is there in the insert tab. So in the insert tab, you can find pivot table. Just simply go to the insert tab and you can click pivot table. So otherwise, we'll use a shortcut called Alt NV. So if it is a old version like 2007 or 2010, the shortcut is Alt NVT. Now from that versions 2013 onwards, we'll use shortcut Alt NV. Once after clicking on pivot table, you will get a create pivot table dialog box. In that there are many options. First is choose the data that you want to analyze. Means for creating pivot table, where you want to take the data, from where you want to take the data. See, there are two options. In that first one is select a table or range. See, after creating the table, the data also you can take for creating pivot table. Otherwise, complete data range also you can take for creating pivot table. See, actually I'm not selecting complete data, just I have selected only one cell. When I'm clicking on pivot table, automatically it takes complete current region. Now you can see there is a line, a dotted line. So it was selected complete current region. If you are placing the cursor anywhere in the complete data range. Now I'm taking select a table or range. Now I have taken this complete data range. Otherwise, we can take use an external data source also. About this option we'll discuss later. Now I'm taking this data for creating the pivot table. Now second option, choose where you want the pivot table report to be placed. Means after taking the data, that pivot table where you want to place the pivot table. So here after taking the data, that pivot table where you wanted to place. Here again in that also two options, new worksheet or existing worksheet. New worksheet means directly it will create, that pivot table will create in the new sheet directly. Existing worksheet means you have to select the location in this same sheet only where you wanted to place the pivot table. Right now I'm selecting new worksheet. I'm taking this data and I'm creating pivot table in the new worksheet. Look at this data range from A1 to G106. It was selected complete region for this data. I'm creating pivot table in new worksheet. Select new worksheet, just click on OK. So pivot table was created in the sheet 1. So automatically it was taken. So after clicking on OK, we got this pivot table outline. It is called a pivot table outline. And after creating the pivot table, you will get extra two tabs. So those are analyze the tab and design tab. So two extra tabs we'll get after creating the pivot table. So those are analyze tab and design tab. Next, this is called pivot table field list. See, pivot table field list. In this pivot table field list, these are all columns. So what are the columns here? That columns becomes pivot fields, pivot table fields. And you can observe there are four areas: filters, columns, rows, values. So if you wanted to place the data column wise, you can drag and drop into the columns. If you want row wise, you can place inside the rows. If you want to do filters, you can place the fields into the filters, and if you want to do any calculations, you can place inside the values like addition, subtraction, multiplication, that calculation part. For that we have to place the pivot fields into the values. Now we'll see how it will work. First of all, I'm taking regions. Just place the regions into the rows areas. Then sales represents into the columns. Next, sales into the values. See, so after just drag and drop, we'll get the pivot table. Just it was summarized. Here we got directly sum of East in Chin, sum of East of francs, like directly we'll get the sum of those values. And in case if you want to change the data from sum to average, count to minimum, also you can change. Just right click, summarize values by, you can select the count. Say by default you got the count. Right click, summarize values by, you go for average. Right click, summarize values by, select maximum. That means just without writing any formulas, just right click, summarize values by, you can select any one, sum, count, average, maximum, minimum. It will update automatically. In case if you are doing any modifications, any changes in the source data, I wanted to update automatically in the pivot table also. We'll see. For example, there is some data. Now in this data range, just I wanted to change the data for East region and Smith sales represent. Now it is the data is East Smith. How much it is? 3695.64. Go to there, East Smith. Instead of 756, go for 950. Just press enter. Go to the pivot table. See, it was not updated. So automatically it will not update. So we have to do refresh the data. See, go to the analyze tab. You can click on refresh. Otherwise, just right click. You can click on refresh option. Otherwise, we'll use shortcut called Alt plus F5. Alt plus F5 means refresh a pivot table. Just click on refresh. See, automatically East Smith was updated. After changing, after doing any modifications in the source data, if you wanted to reflect here, just you can click on refresh. Otherwise, we'll use shortcut Alt plus F5. In case if you have multiple pivot tables in a single sheet, that kind of scenarios, you will use Control plus Alt plus F5. Control plus Alt plus F5 means refresh all pivot tables in a sheet. Alt plus F5 means only one pivot table in a sheet, it will do refresh. Control plus Alt plus F5 means it will refresh all the pivot tables in a sheet. So you can do right click, otherwise you can use shortcut, otherwise you can click on refresh option in the analyzer tab. Next, I wanted to take the product into the filters. That means based on the product column, we'll do the filter. That's why I'm placing that product column, product field into the filters area. Say, go to the product. You can select what are the products you want. You can select and click OK. You will get related to that products only. Again, if you want complete data, go for select all. OK. Means which fields, which columns you want to do filter, just place those into the filters area, and you can go there and you can select what are the values you want. You can select multiple items also. This time I'm placing this product into rows. See, you can see the data. See, these are all regions and products. For the East region, these are all products. For Midwest, these are all products. But at this time, just I want those columns side by side. So below the regions, we got the products. But I want East, Midwest, that regions in one column and products into next column. So then go to the design tab. There is an option in the design tab called report layout. By default, it is in the compact form. So in the report layout, it is in the compact form. Now I am going to select show in tabular form. When I'm selecting tabular form, the columns, the fields are coming side by side, individual columns. See, these are all regions and these are all products. Where go to the design tab, go to the report layout, and you can select show in tabular form. By default, it is in the compact form. Compact form means one after another, and here tabular form means side by side, so that those are divided into the columns. Now we'll get the subtotals and grand totals also for individual products, individual regions. Again, if you don't want, just select product, drag and drop into this pivot fields. So just now we discussed, if you are doing any update, if you are doing any modifications in the source data after doing refresh, the complete data updated in the pivot table also. But this time just I'm adding extra row into the source data. See here, some date, some product like ABC, here region, next sales represents Srinivas, and customer ABC, units 78, sales 2500. See, now go to the pivot table, just go to analyze, click on refresh. See, it was not updated because what is the row we added, it is outside the range. When you wanted to create the pivot table, that time just we selected till 106 rows only, but that row, that data was in the 107th row. Now go to the analyze tab, change data source. See, by default it is till 106 rows only. Now I am going to change 106 to 107. Now okay. Now after adding some data, you no need to create again another pivot table. Just simply go to the analyze tab, go to change data source, change the range. Now you can select the complete columns also. If you are changing continuously, if you are adding continuously rows or columns, you can select complete columns. Complete columns means like A to G. So automatically, if you are adding extra rows, after refreshing, it is reflect automatically in the pivot table also. Like this, we'll add rows or columns into the pivot table. Go to analyze, change data source. You can change the range and you can say okay. See here, ME some data. And if you don't want, you can remove this one also. So here I have deleted that row, and go to the pivot table, go to analyze, just click on refresh. So automatically it was removed from the pivot table also. And another thing, the important thing is pivot table name. See, this is the first pivot table, that's why we got pivot table name is pivot table 1. In case if you wanted to create pivot tables in the macros, this pivot table name is very important. By using this pivot table names only, we'll create the macros. So the pivot table name is pivot table 1. If it is second pivot table, the name is pivot table 2. Go to analyze, you can see the pivot table name. You can find out the pivot table name here. And there is another option called clear. So after taking all the rows and columns, go to clear. You can say clear all. See, we got everything clear. Now from the starting, you can drag and drop pivot fields into the areas. Now like take the region into the rows, sales represent into the columns, and sales into the values. See, like this, after doing clear all, again you can take from the starting. So after creating the pivot table, this complete pivot table, you can move to the another location. Go to the move pivot table. So where you want, you go for new worksheet or else existing worksheet. So new worksheet means again it will create another sheet and it will copy this pivot table to there, and existing worksheet means in this sheet only in some other location. And at the same time, you can create the pivot chart also for this pivot table. Go to the pivot chart. Again, you can select any chart, say line chart, column chart, pie chart, bar chart, area chart, any chart you can select, and you can say click OK. So in the new versions, in the pivot chart also will get the filters. You can do filters here also, in the pivot chart also. So automatically it was updated in the pivot table also. Here you can select what are the sales presence and what are the regions. You can see that data only. So in the new versions you can see this filter option in the pivot chart also. You can say select all, you will get complete data. See where it is. Go to analyze the tab, go to pivot chart, then you can say click OK. See, automatically you will get the pivot chart for the pivot table. If you are doing any modifications, it will reflect here also. If you are doing any filter, it will change here also. So just now we created the pivot table, but so there is another option in the pivot table is called recommended pivot tables. So after clicking on the recommended pivot tables, it suggests some kind of pivot tables. You can choose any one of from this. See, sum of sales by regions, sum of units by regions, sum of sales by products, like many are there. You can choose any one from this. So it is suggesting some of the pivot tables, that is called recommended pivot tables. You can choose any one from this and you can say OK. Automatically it will create the pivot tables that is from the recommended pivot tables. Now we'll see subtotals and grand totals. Go to design tab, there are subtotals. So for this pivot table, if you want subtotals, go to subtotals, you can add the subtotals also. See, there are subtotals 2012 and 2013. Those subtotals are top of the group, but if you want to show all subtotals at bottom of the group, see, you got the subtotal bottom of the group. Go to subtotal top of the group. Go to subtotals. If you don't want, you can remove the subtotals also. You can say do not show subtotals. See, there are no subtotals. Go to subtotals. I'm selecting bottom of group. You will get the subtotals bottom of the group. Like you can create grand totals also. So go to grand totals. So if you wanted to display the grand totals, just you can click on for rows and columns. So already there are grand totals. If you don't want, go to grand totals off for rows and columns. See, those grand totals are removed. Again, if you want, go to grand totals. You can select on for rows and columns. If you want only rows, you can select on for rows, only columns, on for columns. Both means on for rows and columns. If you don't want, you can say off for rows and columns. And blank rows. So after each and every subtotal, you can insert a blank line. Insert a blank line after each item. So you will get the blank row here, blank line here after each and every subtotal. If you don't want to go to blank row, remove blank line after each item. Go to blank row, insert blank line after each item. If you don't want, remove blank line after each item. Now, if you wanted to create a pivot table styles, so you wanted to apply pivot table styles for this pivot table, go to pivot table styles. See, you can select any styles. These are all light colors, medium colors, dark colors. You can choose any pivot table styles from this. You can choose any one from this. You can select. Otherwise, you can create your own pivot table style. Go to pivot table styles. You can select new pivot table style. See, for the first column, go to format. Select the font color. I'm selecting font color is white. Fill color is red. Okay. See, you can observe here. Select header row. Go to format. So select other color, fill color and font color also. Then you can say OK. Again, for every row, for every column, you can choose the format which you want. Now grand total row, go to format, go to font color and select the fill color also. Then you can say OK. See. Then you can give the name for this pivot table style also. By default, it was pivot table style 1. Otherwise, you can change the name. I'm giving like Excel map. Then you can say OK. So you will get that new pivot table style here in the top, that is custom, in the custom Excel map. See, just right click on this pivot table style. You can say set as default. Set as default means whenever if you are creating pivot table, for every pivot table you will get this pivot table style only, and you can modify, you can duplicate it. If you don't want, you can say delete. Then okay. So go to pivot table styles, go to new pivot table style. You can give any name for that, and you can select here first column or anything. Then you can change the colors. Okay, okay. Go to there, the pivot table style. In the custom you will get automatically. Just right click and you can do whatever you want, and you can add to the quick access toolbar here also will get. So if I'm saying add gallery to quick access toolbar, means that custom pivot table style will get here. If you don't want, delete. Okay. Now if you wanted to see this data, so where you got this data, just double click on this cell. So you will get that complete data, complete summary of the pivot table. Just double click on any cell. And if you wanted to see complete row data, just double click on grand total. So you can see the complete data of the particular which one region Midwest. See that region Midwest only. So you will get complete data of Midwest region. So when you are double click on a single cell, you will get that data only. If you are double click on grand total any cell, you will get that complete row. Again you can do here also, you will get that complete column data just when you are doing double click. So now we'll discuss another important concept in the pivot table. Go to insert pivot table. So we discussed about this first option like select table or range. Now we are going to discuss about use an external data source. Now we are going to create a pivot table using external data source. That means without opening the source data, we are going to create the pivot table. Just we are able to see pivot table only. We cannot see the source data. Now first go to the insert tab, pivot table, select use an external data source. After that choose connection. Browse for more. Now select the Excel file. Where is the Excel file? Select the Excel file, then open. So in that Excel file also there are many sheets. So which sheet you want, select that sheet only. Select the sheet, select any one sheet. Okay. See, actually I have selected a sheet name is called sales report. From the sales report I have selected one sheet. That complete sheet data was loaded here. Again, now you can select new worksheet or existing worksheet. Here I am selecting existing worksheet only because I have taken new sheet only in the starting. So select existing worksheet. You can say okay. See, the pivot table outline was created. Again same thing. Just you can drag and drop product rows quarter 1 into the values quarter 2, quarter 3. Like see, there is no source data. Without opening the source data Excel workbook directly, we are creating the pivot table. So first I am taking a new sheet. After that go to insert tab, go to pivot table, just use external data source, choose connection, browse for more, and go select any Excel file, open. Then you can select any one sheet. Okay. Then you can say okay. So automatically the complete data was loaded, and you can drag and drop what are the columns you want into the rows or columns or values or filters. You can drag and drop simply. So like this, see, there is no source data. So without opening the source data, we created the pivot table. So friends, this is the complete pivot table. So we discussed in this what is pivot table, so how to create the pivot table, and what are the pivot fields, and what is the pivot field areas, and how to refresh the data, and how to change the report layout, and how to change the tabular form in the report layout, and how to change the data source, and where we can check the pivot table name, and we did clear also in the pivot table, and we can copy or move the pivot table also, how to create the pivot chart. Next, what is the recommended pivot table? Then we discussed about subtotals, grand totals also, and how to insert the blank rows for each and every subtotals. Next, what are the pivot table styles and how to create our own pivot table style, and how to create the pivot table using external data source. So these are the concepts we discussed in this video session. Thank you friends for watching this video.